Alden's coldest speech, the words that broke them. I stood at the back of Willow Creek's town hall, my 80-year-old legs trembling beneath me. The wooden floor creaked under my weight as I watched Mayor Harrison accept the Community Service Award, my award. He smiled that politician's smile, the one that never reached his eyes, and thanked the crowd for recognizing his decades of dedication. My decades! My dedication! I'd built 3 community centers, organized food drives through every harsh winter, mentored countless young people. Every single achievement he listed was mine. The crowd erupted in applause, and I scanned their faces. Thomas, my friend for 50 years, clapped enthusiastically. Patricia, who'd worked beside me on every project, nodded with approval. Not one person spoke up. Not one. My fists clenched at my sides, knuckles white against weathered skin. My granddaughter Sophia stood near the doorway, her eyes meeting mine across the crowded room. She saw it, the storm building inside me. The betrayal burned hotter than any anger I'd felt in 8 decades. As the mayor shook hands and posed for photographs, I leaned close to Sophia and whispered through gritted teeth, "They'll hear my voice soon enough." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every word the mayor spoke replayed in my mind like a broken record. I sat in my leather chair, the one Emma had given me before she passed, and stared at the photographs lining my study walls. Pictures of ribbon cuttings, groundbreakings, community celebrations, all moments I'd poured my heart into. Sophia brought me tea around midnight, settling onto the ottoman beside me. "Grandfather, please let it go," she urged softly. "They're not worth your peace." But peace had already abandoned me. The betrayal wasn't just about recognition. It was about truth being erased, about history being rewritten while I still breathed. I looked at my granddaughter's worried face and almost agreed to let it go. Almost. Then the doorbell rang. At midnight. Sophia opened the door to find nothing but a single envelope on our doormat. Inside was a typed letter, short and venomous. "Stay silent about tonight, Alden. Speak up, and your past mistakes become front-page news. We know everything. No signature. No return address. Just a threat wrapped in paper." I read it twice, then set it on fire in my study's fireplace. Sophia gasped, but I simply watched it burn, my expression hardening like cooling steel. 2 weeks later, I walked into the town council meeting with a manila folder under my arm. The mayor sat at the head table, confident and relaxed, barely acknowledging my presence. Sophia had spent days digging through old records at the county office, and what she'd found was remarkable. When public comment time arrived, I stood slowly, joints protesting. "Mayor Harrison," I began, my voice steady and clear, "I'd like to discuss the community center project you mentioned at last month's ceremony." His smile faltered slightly. I continued, pulling documents from my folder. "These are the original funding applications, all bearing my signature. These are the architectural plans I drew up. These are testimonials from the builders I hired." I placed each document on the projector, and they appeared on the screen behind him, undeniable and official. "I'm not here seeking credit," I said calmly. "Just clarity." The mayor's face reddened. He stammered something about collaborative efforts and shared vision, but his words tangled together. The council members exchanged glances. Then I noticed a young woman in the back row, phone raised, recording everything. By morning, the video had 20,000 views. The viral video changed everything overnight. My phone rang constantly, reporters, old friends, curious strangers. But the most unexpected call came from someone I'd considered an enemy for 30 years. "Alden, it's Lydia," the voice said. Lydia Montgomery, the woman who'd opposed every initiative I'd championed, who'd made my life difficult at every turn. "We need to talk." We met at a small cafe on the edge of town, away from prying eyes. Lydia looked older than I remembered, her face lined with years of battles fought. "I never liked you," she said bluntly, "but I respect honesty. And Harrison is a liar." She slid a folder across the table. "Property deals, kickbacks, falsified permits. He's been corrupt for years, and I have proof." I studied the documents carefully. "Why help me now?" She smiled grimly. "Because watching your video reminded me why I got into public service. Not for glory, but for truth." As I gathered the papers, Lydia leaned forward. "There's more, Alden. This corruption runs deeper than Harrison. It touches the Blackwood family, the Thorntons, half the town's elite. They're all connected." She paused, her eyes darkening. "And they're all terrified of you." I never released Lydia's documents publicly. I didn't need to. Someone else did it for me, anonymously, through a local news blog that exploded overnight. The details were devastating. Mayor Harrison had approved construction permits for his brother-in-law's company, accepted cash payments disguised as campaign donations, and buried environmental reports that would have stopped profitable developments. Within 48 hours, the story spread to regional news outlets. I watched from my living room as reporters camped outside Harrison's mansion. The mighty mayor who'd stolen my legacy now cowered behind closed curtains, his phone likely ringing as insistently as mine had. But I felt no triumph, only a cold satisfaction that truth was finally surfacing. Then, on the third evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mayor Harrison himself, alone, his usual confidence stripped away. "We need to talk, Alden," he said quietly. I almost closed the door. Instead, I stepped outside. "Make it quick." His expression shifted, hardness replacing desperation. "You think you've won? You're an old man playing a young man's game. Keep pushing, and you'll discover just how much you have to lose." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the cooling dusk, my heart pounding with renewed purpose. That night, I couldn't shake the weight of memories. Harrison's threat had pulled me back 40 years, to another betrayal I'd tried to forget. His name was Vincent, my business partner and closest friend. We'd built a successful construction company together, shaking hands on trust rather than contracts. Then Vincent sold the company from under me, forged my signature, and disappeared with everything. I'd rebuilt my life, starting over at 40, but the wound never fully healed. Now, sitting in my study, I wondered if I'd been too trusting, too naive to see betrayal coming twice. The files Sophia had gathered lay spread across my desk, evidence, dates, testimonies. But something felt incomplete, like a puzzle missing its centerpiece. Morning arrived with another anonymous delivery. This time Sophia found it, a weathered box containing old photographs and documents. I recognized them immediately, proof of Vincent's fraud from decades ago, evidence I'd never been able to locate. Who was sending these? Who wanted me to remember? Then I saw the final item, a recent photograph of Vincent, older but unmistakable, standing beside Mayor Harrison at a charity gala. My blood ran cold. They knew each other. The betrayals weren't separate. They were connected, spanning 40 years of lies. The annual town gathering approached, a summer tradition where residents gathered in Willow Creek Park for speeches, food, and community celebration. I'd attended every year for 50 years, usually staying quiet in the background. Not this time. When the organizer invited community members to speak, I stood and walked to the small stage before anyone could object. The crowd quieted. Hundreds of faces turned toward me, curious and uncertain. I spoke without notes, my voice carrying across the park with unexpected strength. "I've watched this town for 8 decades, I began. "I've seen it grow, change, prosper. But I've also seen truth become optional, honesty become inconvenient. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I spoke about integrity, about the cost of silence, about communities built on lies eventually crumbling under their own weight. My words were measured but cutting, each sentence landing with quiet force. People shifted uncomfortably. Some nodded. Others looked away. When I finished, the silence stretched long and heavy. Then I walked off stage without waiting for applause. As I reached Sophia, I noticed Councilman Fletcher storm past us, his face purple with rage. "You'll regret this, Royce," he hissed. The speech went viral faster than the council meeting video. News outlets called me an unlikely hero and the voice of forgotten integrity. Interview requests flooded in. But so did the backlash. Online commenters called me attention-seeking, bitter, a troublemaker disrupting a peaceful town. Local business owners, loyal to Harrison and his circle, publicly questioned my motives. The criticism stung more than I'd expected. At 80, I thought I'd developed thick skin. I was wrong. Sophia bore the worst of it. She found threatening notes in our mailbox, crude messages spray-painted on our fence, angry voicemails that made my stomach turn. "We should stop," she said one evening, her voice shaking. "This isn't worth your safety. Or mine." I almost agreed. Almost. But backing down now meant Harrison won, meant Vincent won, meant every person who'd ever profited from lies and silence won. That night, I couldn't sleep again. Around 3 a.m., I walked outside to inspect the latest graffiti damage. That's when I saw him, a young man sitting in a parked car across the street, watching our house. When our eyes met, he started the engine and sped away. The next morning, Sophia discovered someone had tried breaking into our shed. Nothing was stolen, but the message was clear. They wanted us afraid. Lydia called with urgency in her voice. "Meet me at the old library, immediately." I found her in the archives section, surrounded by dusty boxes and yellowed documents. "I've been digging deeper," she explained, spreading papers across a table. "The corruption isn't recent, Alden. It's generational." She showed me property records from the 1970s, revealing how prominent families, the Blackwoods, Thorntons, and others, had systematically acquired land through suspicious means. Rezoning approvals came suspiciously fast. Environmental assessments disappeared. Citizens who protested faced mysterious legal troubles. "Mayor Harrison isn't the disease," Lydia said grimly. "He's just a symptom. This town's power structure has been corrupt for 50 years. I studied the documents, my mind reeling. I'd lived through these decades, witnessed these changes, but never connected the dots. There's more," Lydia continued. 3 journalists tried investigating this over the years. One lost their job. One left town under mysterious circumstances. The third. She paused. Died in a car accident that was never properly investigated. I looked up sharply. "You're saying they killed someone?" Lydia's expression was grim. "I'm saying the Blackwood family will do anything to protect their empire. And right now, you're their biggest threat." Mayor Harrison's counterattack came swift and brutal. During a televised interview, he painted me as a bitter old man seeking revenge for imagined slights. "Alden Royce has contributed to our community," he said with practiced sympathy, "but age and resentment have clouded his judgment. These accusations are baseless, hurtful, and frankly sad." Local news ran stories questioning my mental fitness. Former acquaintances gave interviews suggesting I'd become paranoid and difficult. Even Thomas, my supposed friend of 50 years, told reporters I'd changed and wasn't the man I used to be. The betrayal cut deeper than Harrison's theft ever could. But the worst came when Patricia, who'd worked beside me for decades, appeared on television with tears in her eyes. "Alden was once a good man," she said sadly, "but power and attention have corrupted him. The Alden I knew would never cause such division." I watched from my living room, feeling the careful dismantling of my reputation. Sophia sat beside me, her jaw clenched in fury. "It's all lies, grandfather." Then she gasped, pointing at her laptop screen. "Look at this." She'd found it, a forged document bearing my signature, claiming I'd misappropriated community funds years ago. The forgery was crude but effective, already spreading across social media. They weren't just attacking my credibility, they were trying to destroy me completely. I spent 3 days locked in my study, planning. Sophia brought meals I barely touched, watching me work with growing concern. But this required precision, not emotion. Every document had to be authentic. Every timeline had to be verified. Every witness statement had to be unimpeachable. I'd learned from their tactics. They relied on confusion, on overwhelming the public with conflicting narratives until truth became murky. I would do the opposite, present facts so clear, so undeniable, that no amount of spin could dismiss them. Lydia helped coordinate witnesses, retired town employees, former contractors, honest bookkeepers who'd kept records the corrupt officials thought were destroyed. I scheduled a live-streamed town hall meeting, bypassing traditional media that Harrison's allies controlled. The announcement spread quickly. Some people praised my courage, others predicted my humiliation. Mayor Harrison tried blocking the venue, but the owner, a widow whose late husband I'd once helped, offered her property instead. Everything was falling into place. The night before the confrontation, I rehearsed my speech, not memorizing words, but clarifying thoughts. I needed to be sharp, focused, unshakable. Sophia sat in as my audience. "You're going to destroy them," she said when I finished. I shook my head. "I'm going to let truth destroy them. There's a difference." As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with an anonymous text. "Your speech tomorrow will be recorded. Everything you say will be evidence. Choose wisely, old man." The venue overflowed. People stood along the walls, sat on the floor, crowded the doorway. Cameras from 5 news stations captured every angle. Mayor Harrison sat in the front row, flanked by lawyers, his expression carefully neutral. I walked to the podium slowly, my hands steady despite my racing heart. When I spoke, my voice filled the room with unexpected power. I began with facts, dates, documents, testimonies. I showed the real property records, the authentic funding applications, the original architectural plans. I presented witnesses who confirmed my work, my dedication, my truth. But I didn't stop there. I revealed the decades of corruption Lydia had uncovered, connecting current officials to past misdeeds. I showed how families like the Blackwoods had built empires on stolen land and silenced voices. I presented evidence of kickbacks, falsified permits, and buried reports. Each revelation landed like a hammer blow. The crowd grew restless, angry murmurs spreading. Mayor Harrison's lawyers whispered urgently, but he sat frozen, his careful composure cracking. When I finished, the silence was deafening. Then someone started applauding. Then another. Then dozens. Harrison stood abruptly and left, his lawyers scrambling after him. But I noticed something else. Someone in the audience, phone raised, had recorded everything. and based on their satisfied smile, they'd captured something even more valuable. Harrison and his team discussing their next retaliation move before my speech started. The recording was already uploading. 2 days later, a ghost from my past appeared. Vincent walked into the cafe where Sophia and I sat, older but unmistakable, that same arrogant swagger somehow surviving 40 years. "Hello, Alden," he said, sliding uninvited into our booth. My hand tightened around my coffee cup. "You have 30 seconds before I leave." Vincent smirked. "I know things about you, old friend. Things that could ruin whatever moral crusade you're on. Remember Dallas? Remember the Riverside Project?" My stomach dropped. The Riverside Project, a development I'd been involved with decades ago that had ended badly. Not through my fault, but through circumstances I'd never fully explained. Vincent leaned forward. "I have documents suggesting otherwise. I could make you look as corrupt as Harrison." Sophia started to speak, but I touched her arm. "Go ahead," I told Vincent. "Release whatever you want. Unlike you, I'm not afraid of my past." He studied me, surprised by my calmness. Then his smirk returned. "We'll see how brave you are when your legacy burns." After he left, Sophia turned to me urgently. "Grandfather, I found something yesterday. A recording from 40 years ago. Your conversation with the Riverside investors. It proves you were innocent, that Vincent framed you." She pulled out her phone. "It was in those boxes someone anonymously sent. I've been trying to verify its authenticity." I listened to my younger self's voice, clear and honest, explaining why I couldn't support the project's unethical approach. The recording proved everything. But who sent it? And why now? Willow Creek erupted. The recordings from the town hall, both my speech and Harrison's pre-speech plotting, divided the community into furious factions. Town council meetings became shouting matches. Local businesses picked sides, some refusing service to Harrison supporters, others boycotting anyone who backed me. I'd wanted truth, not civil war. The chaos spiraled beyond my control. Social media exploded with hashtags, think pieces, and endless debates. News vans permanently camped outside town hall. Protesters gathered daily, their signs ranging from supportive to viciously hostile. Through it all, I stayed home, watching the storm I'd unleashed. Sophia fielded calls from reporters, lawyers, and concerned citizens. Mayor Harrison's allies scrambled to contain the damage, but each defensive statement only raised more questions. Then Lydia called with urgency, shaking her voice. "Alden, I intercepted information. Harrison's planning something catastrophic. A press conference tomorrow where he'll release fabricated evidence against you. Documents, testimonies, everything. It's sophisticated enough to confuse people, create reasonable doubt." My chest tightened. "Can we stop it?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but we have 18 hours to try." That night, Sophia and I worked frantically, preparing countermeasures. But I felt the weight of age pressing down, 80 years of life, and it might all end with my name dragged through mud by elaborate lies. Around midnight, another anonymous package arrived. Inside was a USB drive labeled simply, "The Truth About Tomorrow." We hesitated, then plugged it in. What we saw changed everything. I sat alone in my study that night, the USB drive's contents weighing heavily on my mind. The footage showed Harrison's team rehearsing their press conference, perfecting lies about my supposed corruption. But it also showed something else: internal disagreements, moral hesitations, one person questioning if they'd gone too far. I'd spent weeks fighting external enemies, exposing corruption, revealing lies. but I hadn't stopped to examine my own motivations. Was this about justice? Or was I, as Harrison claimed, driven by bitterness and wounded pride? I thought about Emma, my late wife, who'd always seen through my righteous anger to the hurt beneath. "Alden," she'd say gently, "revenge dressed as justice is still revenge. Be honest about which one you're serving." I looked at the photographs on my walls, decades of community work, genuine smiles, real connections. Somewhere along the way, I'd convinced myself this fight was purely about truth. But truth was only part of it. I wanted them to hurt like I'd hurt. I wanted them to feel the sting of betrayal. The realization didn't shame me. It clarified me. Yes, I wanted justice. But I also wanted closure, for Vincent's betrayal, for Harrison's theft, for 40 years of swallowed anger. That night, my phone rang. It was Sophia, calling from downstairs. Her voice trembled. "Grandfather, come quickly. There's something you need to know about my mother." My heart stopped. "What about your mother?" "She's been helping Harrison all along." The revelation about my daughter, Sophia's mother, nearly broke me. But the evidence was undeniable. Phone records showing regular contact with Harrison's team, financial transfers disguised as business expenses, strategic information leaks that had undermined my efforts. Amanda, my own daughter, had betrayed me. Sophia confronted her mother by phone while I listened, my world crumbling. "Why?" Sophia demanded through tears. Amanda's voice came cold and distant. "Because Dad's crusade is destroying our family's reputation. Because his obsession makes us look like vengeful troublemakers. I did what I had to do to protect our name. By helping the people who stole from him," Sophia shouted. "By choosing their lies over his truth." The call ended badly. But Amanda's betrayal, ironically, gave us ammunition. She'd kept records of Harrison's team's strategies, evidence of their planned fabrications. In trying to stop me, she'd documented their crimes. 2 days later, we submitted everything to the state attorney general's office. The investigation launched immediately, backed by undeniable evidence and credible witnesses. Mayor Harrison held his planned press conference, but it fell flat. Reporters, now aware of the official investigation, asked pointed questions he couldn't answer. Within a week, formal charges were filed: corruption, fraud, misuse of public funds. Harrison's empire began crumbling. I watched the news with mixed emotions. Satisfaction, yes, but also profound sadness. Victory tasted bitter when seasoned with family betrayal. But Harrison wasn't finished. He vowed to fight, hinting darkly at personal attacks that would reveal the real Alden Royce. The war wasn't over. It was entering its final, most dangerous phase. Another unexpected ally emerged: Marcus, a town councilman who'd publicly opposed me for months. He appeared at my door one evening, exhausted and frightened. "I can't do it any more," he said. "The lies, the threats, the constant fear. I'm done being Harrison's puppet." Marcus revealed the full scope of the conspiracy: blackmail, intimidation, financial manipulation. Harrison and the Blackwood family controlled Willow Creek through fear, not leadership. Anyone who opposed them faced destroyed careers, ruined reputations, or worse. "There's a vault," Marcus explained, "in the Blackwood estate's basement. Documents going back 50 years, every dirty deal, every covered-up crime, every person they've destroyed." He handed me a key. "I made a copy years ago. Insurance if they ever turned on me. Use it." We planned carefully. Breaking into the Blackwood estate was risky, potentially illegal. But Lydia knew someone, a former archivist who'd worked there, fired after discovering irregularities. Together, we could access the vault legally through official channels if we coordinated with investigators. But before we could act, disaster struck. Fire broke out at the town's archive building, the one holding decades of public records. Firefighters battled the blaze for hours. By morning, most historical documents were destroyed, including many we'd planned to use as evidence. Standing in the smoking ruins, watching investigators sift through ash, I felt defeat creeping in. Then I saw Lydia, covered in soot, clutching a fireproof box. "I got here in time," she gasped. "The most important documents. I saved them. The fire wasn't an accident. Someone had tried erasing history. They'd failed." The pressure on Sophia intensified. A well-dressed man approached her at the grocery store, introducing himself as a concerned citizen who admired her loyalty. Then he offered her $50,000 to convince me to drop everything. "Your grandfather's already won the moral battle," the man said smoothly. "Why push further? Take the money, save your family from more pain." Sophia recorded the conversation and reported it. But worse came that evening. Private conversations, discussions between Sophia and me about strategy, doubts, plans, appeared online, selectively edited to make us look manipulative and calculating. Someone had bugged our house. We found 3 devices, one in my study, one in the living room, one in Sophia's bedroom. The violation felt sickening. We swept for more, changed all our phones, moved our planning sessions to random outdoor locations. Trust became our scarcest resource. But Sophia never wavered. When reporters asked if she regretted supporting me, she looked directly into the camera and said, "My grandfather taught me that truth matters more than comfort. If standing with him costs me everything, it's a price I'll gladly pay." Her words went viral, spawning a movement among younger residents tired of their parents' corruption. Students organized protests. Young professionals demanded transparency. A generational divide split Willow Creek, with youth rallying behind truth while established powers clung to comfortable lies. The tide was turning. But tides can drown the unprepared. As we celebrated small victories, neither Sophia nor I realized Harrison was preparing his most devastating counterstrike yet. Mayor Harrison staged his comeback during a televised charity gala, a glittering event designed to remind everyone of his charm and influence. Dressed impeccably, surrounded by supporters, he delivered a speech crafted to destroy me without ever mentioning my name. "Some people," he said smoothly, "exploit community divisions for personal glory. They wrap themselves in righteousness while tearing apart the social fabric." The camera panned across nodding elites. They claim moral superiority, but their true motivation is simple: revenge for perceived slights. He painted me as bitter, vengeful, destructive, a sad old man who couldn't accept that times had changed. The performance was masterful. I watched from home, recognizing the skill in his manipulation. He never directly lied, just shaded truth until it resembled fiction. But I stayed composed. His hubris would be his undoing. I just had to wait. Then the reporter struck. A young journalist, one I'd never met, stood and asked, "Mayor Harrison, is it true you've been under investigation by the state attorney general for 6 months?" The gala froze. Harrison's smile faltered. "I'm not at liberty to discuss ongoing. Is it true," the reporter continued, "that investigators have evidence linking you to fraud, corruption, and obstruction of justice?" The room erupted. Cameras swiveled. Harrison's handlers tried shutting down questions, but the damage was done. As chaos engulfed the gala, another reporter approached me outside my home. "Mr. Royce, sources suggest you also have secrets from your past. Care to comment?" My chest tightened. They were coming for my history now. The reckoning I'd forced on others was turning toward me. I spent 3 days preparing my final speech. Every word mattered. Every sentence had to land with precision. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about legacy, about leaving Willow Creek better than I'd found it, about proving that one person's voice could still matter. Sophia helped me rehearse, challenging weak points, strengthening arguments. Lydia provided additional evidence that had surfaced. Marcus offered insider perspective on what the town needed to hear. My speech would address everything: the corruption, the cover-ups, my own past mistakes, and the path forward. I wouldn't shy from my imperfections. Honesty required admitting when I'd fallen short, when anger had clouded judgment, when pride had driven decisions. But I would also stand firm on truth, on the undeniable facts that no spin could dismiss. The night before the speech, I barely slept. 80 years of life had led to this moment, one final chance to be heard, truly heard, without filter or mediation. Then, at dawn, my phone rang. It was Marcus, his voice shaking with excitement. "Alden, you won't believe this. Harrison's chief advisor just walked into the state attorney's office with boxes of evidence. He's flipping. He's testifying against everyone. Harrison, the Blackwoods, all of them." I sat down heavily, processing the news. The advisor's betrayal wasn't loyalty to truth. It was self-preservation. But the effect was the same. Harrison's last line of defense had collapsed. As I prepared to leave for my speech, I realized the landscape had shifted. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. Truth had found its own momentum. The town hall overflowed again, but the atmosphere felt different, charged with anticipation rather than anger. I walked to the podium, my prepared speech folded in my pocket. But standing there, looking at hundreds of faces, I realized something. I didn't need the paper. These weren't calculated words anymore. They were simply true. "I'm 80 years old," I began, my voice steady and cold. "I've watched this town for 8 decades. I've seen it at its best and, recently, at its worst. I spoke about betrayal, not just mine, but the community's. I detailed the corruption with precision, naming names and citing evidence. But I also spoke about complicity, about good people who'd stayed silent, who'd chosen comfort over courage. Some of you were my friends," I said, my gaze sweeping the crowd. "You watched them steal my legacy and said nothing. Not because you didn't know better, but because speaking up was inconvenient." The room was silent, heavy with truth. But silence isn't neutrality. Silence is consent. And for too long, this town has consented to lies. I addressed my own mistakes next, times I'd been too proud, too angry, too focused on vindication. I wasn't perfect, but I'd never stopped trying to do right. When I spoke about Harrison, my voice dropped to something colder than anger. Mayor Harrison built his career on stolen valor and buried truth. He's not an aberration. He's what happens when communities value comfort over character. As I finished, Mayor Harrison, watching from somewhere, suffered what witnesses later described as a breakdown, his composure finally, completely shattered. In the hall, silence stretched endlessly. Then someone stood and began clapping slowly. Then another. Then hundreds. Not celebration. Acknowledgement. The aftermath exploded across every platform. National news picked up the story. My speech became a case study in accountability, courage, and the power of truth. Clips went viral with millions of views. I became, improbably, an unlikely symbol, proof that age didn't equal irrelevance, that one voice could still shatter corruption. But Willow Creek itself remained divided. Those who'd backed Harrison felt humiliated, defensive. Those who'd stayed silent felt exposed. Young people celebrated, while older residents struggled with having their comfortable world upended. Former friends approached me with awkward apologies. Thomas found me at the grocery store, tears in his eyes. "I was wrong, Alden. I should have spoken up. I was a coward." Patricia sent a handwritten letter admitting shame. Others stayed away, unable to face their complicity. The investigation expanded daily. State and federal officials descended on Willow Creek, subpoenaing records, interviewing witnesses, building cases. The Blackwood family hired expensive lawyers. Several council members resigned. Harrison himself remained largely hidden, reportedly under medical supervision. I gave careful interviews, staying focused on facts rather than triumph. Because this wasn't victory, it was reckoning, messy and painful and necessary. Then the mysterious figure returned. Another anonymous package arrived, this time containing photographs of me from 40 years ago, meeting with people I'd rather forget. A note read, "Every hero has secrets, Alden. Yours are next." The threat was clear. Someone still wanted to destroy me, and they were saving their best weapon for last. Sophia worked frantically, trying to identify who'd sent the threatening package before they could release whatever damaging information they held. The photographs showed me at various meetings during the Riverside Project years, the development Vincent had later used to frame me. But these photos suggested something darker, that I'd been more involved than I'd admitted, that my innocence might be complicated. Late one night, Sophia burst into my study, laptop open. "Grandfather, I found something. These photos are real, but they're missing context." She tracked down other people in the photographs, now elderly themselves. Through interviews and old records, she'd reconstructed the truth. I had attended those meetings, but as an opponent, not a participant. I'd been trying to stop the project from inside, gathering evidence of wrongdoing. When Vincent realized what I was doing, he'd framed me to silence my opposition. The truth was exonerating, but complex. Without full context, the photos looked damning. Releasing them without explanation could destroy everything. But holding them back meant living under someone's threat. "We need to get ahead of this," Sophia urged. "Release everything ourselves. The photos, the explanation, the whole story. Control the narrative." She was right. We scheduled a press conference for the next day. But that night, I received a call. A familiar voice, one I hadn't heard in decades. "Hello, Alden. It's been a long time." My blood ran cold. "What do you want?" "Just to talk. About the past. About what really happened in Dallas. About whether Willow Creek deserves to know the whole truth about their hero. I made a decision that would define everything." The final revelation came not from me, but from Sophia. At the scheduled press conference, she presented everything: the photographs, the context, witness testimonies, and complete documentation of the Riverside Project. But she added something unexpected: evidence that the person threatening us was Harrison's brother, Philip, who'd been working behind the scenes throughout the entire conflict. Philip Harrison had orchestrated the anonymous packages, planted the bugs, spread misinformation. He'd done it to protect his brother, but also to protect the deeper corruption involving the Blackwood family, corruption Philip himself benefited from through lucrative government contracts. Sophia had traced everything: digital footprints, financial transactions, property records. Her generation's technical skills had cracked what my generation's methods couldn't touch. As she presented the evidence, methodically and thoroughly, I watched Philip's carefully constructed anonymity crumble. State investigators moved immediately, adding new charges to their growing case. But Philip had one final move. Through his lawyers, he revealed documents suggesting Mayor Harrison had tried backing out of the conspiracy years ago, that he'd been blackmailed into continued participation. The revelation complicated everything. Was Harrison a villain or a victim? Both. Neither. The public response split further, some demanding mercy, others insisting on accountability regardless of coercion. For me, the distinction didn't matter. Harrison had chosen silence over courage, comfort over honesty. Whatever pressures he'd faced, he'd had the same choice as everyone: speak truth or enable lies. He'd chosen wrong. As chaos swirled around us, I realized something profound. Perfect justice might be impossible, but better justice was within reach. 6 months later, I stood on the town hall steps one last time. The building looked the same, but Willow Creek had changed. Mayor Harrison was gone, awaiting trial. 3 council members had resigned. The Blackwood family's influence had crumbled under investigation. New leadership emerged, younger, more diverse, more transparent. The town wasn't healed, but it was healing. Scars remained. Families were divided. Friendships had ended. Some people would never forgive me for shattering their comfortable lies. Others wouldn't forgive themselves for their silence.